Finnish teachers answer your questions. Lesson number 15. How do you ask for the time in Finnish? How do you ask for the time in Finnish?
And how do you tell the time?
At finishpod101.com, we hear these questions often. In the following situation, during a school break, Sasha Lee asks her classmate Noora Newland about the time. They don't want to be late for their next class. Sasha asks, "What time is it?"
Mitä kello on?
Listen to the full conversation.
Mitä kello on?
Se on 2:15.
Once more with the English translation.
Mitä kello on?
What time is it?
Se on 2:15.
It's 3:15. Knowing how to ask for the time, as well as how to tell the time, is fundamental when you're learning Finnish. In this lesson, you will learn how to do both. The Finnish word for time, by the way, is
Aika.
one important thing you must understand when it comes to telling time in Finnish is that both the 24-hour clock and 12-hour clock are used, with the former being used in formal situations and the latter in less formal ones. Let's take a closer look at the dialogue. Do you remember how Sasha Lee says, "What time is it?"
Mitä kello on?
Just as in any language, this is the easiest way to ask for time in Finnish. When referring to time as measured in hours and minutes, they use the word
Kello.
which literally means clock. Now, let's say you're asking for the time in a particular event, like a game for instance. In that case, you can say something like,
Mihin aikaan peli alkaa?
or what time does the game start? This time, let's assume that you want to ask a stranger for the time because you don't have a watch and your phone is dead. The most polite way to ask for time in this case is by saying,
Anteeksi, mutta mitähän kello mahtaa olla?
or excuse me, but I'm wondering what time it is. Literally, this question means, excuse me, but what time might the clock be? You can also say something like,
Anteeksi, tiedättekö mitä kello on?
which means, excuse me, do you know what time it is? Or,
Anteeksi, sattuisiko teillä olemaan kelloa?
excuse me, would you happen to have the time? Now let's take a look at our second sentence. Do you remember how Noora says, it's 3:15?
Se on 2:15.
There are several ways to tell the time in Finnish, and this is just one of them. In this case, Noora uses the phrase,
2:15.
which means 15. An optional way to express the time would be,
3:15.
or 3:15. Finns also use the expression half past for telling time 30 minutes past an hour. This is done with the use of the word,
Puoli.
which means half. Keep in mind that, when using this expression, you don't say the exact hour, but the hour after it. For instance, if the time is 5:30, you would say,
Kello on 5:30.
this is literally, it's 5:30, meaning there is 30 minutes until it's 6 o'clock. But we understand it as it's 5:30. You can also express the time using the 24-hour clock and stating the hour, followed by the minutes. For example, 2:30 p.m. would be,
14:30.
which is literally 14:30. Finally, you can also use the expressions
Yli.
past and
Vaille.
before when telling the time in Finnish. If it's 2:05, you can say,
Kello on 2:05.
or it's 2:05. And if the time is 9:50, you can say,
Kello on 10:10.
it's 10 before 10. When it's just a few minutes past the hour, you can use the adverb little and say,
Kello on vähän yli 2.
or it's a little over 2. The same goes when it's just a few minutes to the hour.
Kello on vähän vaille 10.
or it's a little before 10. As you can see, the way to tell time in Finnish is very similar to how it's done in the English language. In this lesson, you learned various ways to ask for and tell the time in Finnish. Now let's look at some examples to memorize what we just learned. Our first example is,
Mitä kello on? Se on 3:15.
what time is it? It's 3:15.
Anteeksi, tiedättekö mitä kello on? Se on 3:15.
Excuse me, do you know what time it is? It's 3:15.
Anteeksi, mutta mitähän kello mahtaa olla? Se on 7:30.
Excuse me, do you know what time it is? It's 7:30. In English, AM and PM are often used to indicate what part of the day something is happening. In Finnish, the equivalent of AM is,
Aamupäivä,
and PM is.
iltapäivä.
It's acceptable to use both when telling time in Finnish, although Finns prefer to use other expressions of time to specify the time of day. For instance, one would say,
Kello on 8 aamulla.
or it's 8 in the morning. It's 8 a.m. But
Kello on 10 aamupäivällä.
it's 10 in the forenoon. It's 10 a.m. If it's 2 p.m., you can say,
Kello on 2 iltapäivällä.
or it's 2 in the afternoon. You can also say,
Kello on 8 illalla.
or it's 8 o'clock in the evening. Finally, you can use two expressions for telling time early in the morning. For instance, if it's 2 a.m., you can say,
Kello on 2 yöllä.
this literally means it's 2 o'clock at night. The word
Yöllä.
means at night. However, Finns would understand it as it's 2 in the morning. To be more specific, you can say something like,
Kello on 4 aamuyöllä.
which means it's 4 o'clock in the morning, with the word
Aamuyö.
meaning the small hours, referring to the time between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. Other useful time-related words are
Keskipäivä.
or noon and
Keskiyö.
midnight. We've learned that we can string the hour and minutes together to tell time in Finnish. We've also learned that, when doing this, Finns would typically use the 24-hour clock instead of the 12-hour clock. For instance, if it's exactly 8 o'clock, one would say,
8:00.
or 8:00. Numbers in Finnish can be quite long. And one interesting fact about Finnish numbers is that they are often shortened and modified for more efficient speech. This is only done in colloquial speech, however, and not in formal situations. This is also practiced when telling time. For instance, instead of saying
17:20,
one would say,
17:20.
or it's 17:20, which is 3 syllables shorter. Do you have any more questions? We're here to answer them.
Hei hei.
See you soon.